much, Martin, and good evening, everyone. Back in the 1980s, Mayor Joseph P. Riley of Charleston, South Carolina, asked me to come down to his historic city and take a walk with him downtown. Wasn't easy to do, but he did get me there. And as we walked around, his beautiful city had certainly seen better days. Along King, Market, and Meeting Streets, Charleston's main retail thoroughfares, were boarded up storefronts and broken glass in the street that drained the energy from the merchants fighting for survival. Mayor Riley knew he needed major new development to reclaim the city's position as a regionally competitive shopping destination, and he asked me to help him. I knew that tracking such a sensitive planning and design challenge required the involvement of extraordinary architects. So I turned to the firm of John Carl Warnicke and Associates. Mr. Warnicke, who just passed away this year at 91 years old, after a distinguished career as one of the world's great contextual architects, designed the John F. Kennedy Internal Flame Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery, among many, many projects over the years. Understanding the scope of the project, we and Mayor Riley envisioned for Charleston, and John had good judgment to reach out to one of his former partners, tonight's speaker, Eugene Kohn. Well, it was the first time I'd met and worked with Mr. Kohn, who in 1976, along with Bill Pedersen and Sheldon Fox, founded the architectural firm of Kohn, Pedersen, and Fox. The result of this collaboration was a retail conference hotel complex known as Charleston Place, which since its opening in 1986 has been credited with revitalizing the city's now vibrant downtown. That experience in South Carolina, which began would have been me a lasting personal relationship and friendship with Gene. Since Charleston Place, I and the Taubman Company have had the good fortune to work with Kohn, Pedersen, and Fox on 712 Fifth Avenue, a 52-story building at Fifth Avenue and 56th Street in New York, which preserved the historic brownstone structure at the base with its lilac windows and very beautiful facade. And 1325 Avenue Americas in New York, which features a 34-story, 750,000 square foot mid-block tower, which combines expansion space on 2 floors for the adjacent New York Hilton Hotel and a through gallery through the Sotheby's building in New York at 72nd Street and York Avenue, where we converted a 4-story Kodak warehouse into a dramatic 10-story, 400,000 square foot headquarters that stands today. Next, the Walter Ford II building right here in Detroit on the campus of College of Creative Studies. And that's a facade, front facade. And the Songo International Business District, a 1,500-acre city constructed in South Korea, where Taubman Asia, a subsidiary of Taubman Company, is planning the city's 10 million square feet of retail offerings. The massive public-private project, master planned by Kohn, Pedersen, Fox, was awarded the first annual Sustainable Cities Award, sponsored jointly by the Financial Times and the Urban Land Institute. Songdo IBD, when fully completed in 2015, be home to 65,000 people and host a daily workforce of 300,000 and 45 million square feet of office space. The district is connected to Incheon International Airport, 7.5-mile bridge, and Seoul to the subway. All of these projects, along with such iconic structures as Shanghai World Trade Center, Financial Center, and the new Unilever headquarters building in London, have benefited from Gene and his firm's talents. KPF now operates internationally out of offices in New York, London, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Seoul, and Abu Dhabi. These accomplishments are not impressive enough. Gene is the first architect awarded the honor of Executive Fellow of the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University. So please join me in welcoming one of the most successful and respected architects in the world today, my friend Eugene Kohn.
Thank you, Al. Everybody here? I'll stand up front. Al, I want to talk about Al first, because Al calls, I do whatever Al asks for. He says, because Al's one of the most special people I've ever known, worked with, been a friend of. He's not only extremely talented as an architect in his own right, but one of the very best developers to work with, because he cares about quality, he cares about the people who inhabit these buildings, see them, and he's just very special. He's also one of the most generous people. He gives more to charity and more to universities and colleges to help further education than anyone I know, and also in medical research. So it's for me an honor just to be in Al's company and to be asked by Al to be here today. So I am delighted to be here. I unfortunately flew in from Europe yesterday, so I may appear a bit tired, and I also taught a class today with Al. It's a great class. That was from 3 to 5, so losing my voice. I may be a bit tired, but I am excited about being here. And I'm going to try something unique out. I've never tried this with a lecture. Most architects love to come show their work, talk about how great their philosophy is, how special their buildings are. And I could do the same because we're very proud of the work we've done. But I thought it might be more interesting to the students to talk about how one starts a firm, how the firm changes over time as you add partners, promote people, begin to work in different areas, become global. And the impact of global architecture on not just this country, but on our firm as well, has been a great lesson and a great teaching tool. And so I thought I might share some of the stories using our buildings as benchmarks as we move through the many years. Now, just very briefly, when Al talked about John Carl Warnke, I was president of John Carl Warnke for many years. In 1976, early in 76, I decided to leave to start my own firm. And things were pretty bad in 76. Most of you, of course, would not remember. But in 1973 to 76 was a horrible recession. There was 60% unemployment for architects in New York alone. So you could hire the best architects, but they had no jobs. But you needed work to do that. To start a firm on July 4th of 1976 took a lot of courage, or we lacked intelligence. I'm not sure which it was. But I believe, after doing a lot of research about companies that started in the Depression, that it was in fact the best time to start was in the worst of times. Because in the worst of times, you have a chance to plan intelligently, seek advice. And I can tell you in those days, I would seek advice from former friends and clients, including Stanley Marcus and Neiman Marcus, the president of AT&T, etc. And those people who gave me advice wanted to come true. So they became the ones who recommended us for new projects and helped to get started. But it was an interesting time, and one that while families and friends said, you're crazy, what are you doing, starting a firm? when the worst of times, I had just supreme confidence. I had no evidence to back it up, but just confidence that we'd succeed. My two partners, Bill Pedersen and Shelley Fox, who joined me, had a little less confidence. But Bill was a bit younger. Shelley and I were classmates in school, so we kind of shared the same background of being in the military, which, by the way, I know it was a major help. I was a naval officer, and Shelley was in the Army as an officer, but a major help in leading a firm and building a firm and dealing with all kinds of situations around the world. So we served in the Korean War, and then came back and started our firm shortly after. But shortly after, yes.
Mr. Kohn, can I interrupt Mr. Prime to see if you have microphone?
Sure. Is everybody here? Are you listening back there, or are you sleeping out there? Am I putting you to sleep? Raise your hand if you can't hear. Want to move down? There's a lot of empty seats close by. I'm not going to raise you so you can come as close to the front row as you like.
Unfortunately, I gave all the best information up front, so you've missed that. I'm sorry. Just talking about how we got started. So anyway, we decided to start this firm, and the first 3 months there was no work, except, and I was a little nervous because I had 2 children in school, or 3 children in school, and they were going to need some money to survive as well. So what happened was that in ABC had a little, let me tell you about this first. I had a very wealthy friend, not an architect, who said, Gene, you will succeed by the work you turn down. Now just think about that. I have no work, and he says you succeed by the work you turn down. And I wasn't sure that he was sane, but I thought, well, maybe it's good advice. But sure enough, within the first month or 2, that advice would be tested. I had been working in Iran prior to starting the firm for John Carl Warnke. We were doing a big project, didn't get paid, it never went ahead. But when I came back, the president of one of the banks called and said, you're starting your own firm, we have this big job, we'd like you to do it. And big fee, and it sounded good. My partners and I thought it over and said, you know, look, we want to start a firm, we're going to be in New York. We want to get to be known in the US. So going to Iran, long trips, worrying about getting paid, doing the work, didn't seem to make a lot of sense despite terrific fee. Example, the fee was $1.1 million in 1976. Not bad for a young firm of 3 people starting out. So we turned it down. I still remember we were in Shelley Fox's kitchen. We didn't have an office, leaning against the refrigerator because I needed to hold on to something to turn this job down. And I told the president, I said, look, we would love to do it, but it's just difficult. Now, the good thing was, so here I felt so sick that whole night, you know, we just turned down this job. The next day in the Sunday Times, little article says the American Broadcasting Company buys an armory on Upper West Side of 66 Columbus to Central Park. Armory was 43,000 square feet. And it said in the Armory they hoped to make it the first 1-hour-long soap opera studio. Okay? So I said, well, I knew a vice president, Shelley knew one, we wrote our friend. We got an interview, and we're the only architect that ever contacted them. Believe that, because everybody was so concerned about working in Saudi Arabia, Iran, and elsewhere, they didn't bother reading this little article in the real estate section. So we got an interview, and we won, fortunately, because if we lost, it'd been pretty embarrassing since nobody was competing with us. But we did win, and we did the Armory. And then the master plan for ABC in the Upper West Side. We did buildings every year for the next 17 years. And they paid within 10 days. You invoice them, 10 days. We got excellent fees. And that job, ABC, not only saved us, but it led to one thing after another. This is an interesting thing. You know, in your life, you always said, if I made this decision, what would happen? If I made that? Well, I can tell you, having made this decision, I can see all the things that have happened since that were positive. And if we hadn't made that decision, I can see all the things that wouldn't have happened. What happened was that, and I'm going to show you these slides in a minute, just want to make the introduction. In 1976, the end of beginning of 77, Tom Klutznick of Urban Investment called me, a marvelous developer in Chicago, and said that ABC was his tenant, and they were thinking of moving, and he thought he had to build a new building in order to attract them to stay with him. And he said, you are obviously experts with ABC, and you know them, because you work with them. Now, we had already been working a month. There was no way I was an expert on ABC, but I didn't bother to clarify that we weren't. I assumed that it was okay to let him think. And we did become. So we designed 333 Wacker Drive, you'll see that in a moment, a curved building on the bend of the Chicago River, 1 million square feet. And Tom Klesnick fell in love with it. And even though ABC decided not to move, and the market was terrible then, I did this in class today, I showed all the charts of the economy, he decided, he put the building on hold, he put the model on the shelf, but the shelf was over his desk. And every day he looked at that and he said, I love this building, I got to build it. He called me 1 year later and said, Gene, we're going to build this building. I said, you're kidding. I mean, not quite that way. I said, great. And here we are, unknown. I mean, even our families didn't know who we were. You come into Chicago, this great city, to do a building of 1 million square feet on the Chicago River is quite a break. And Perkins & Will, a very fine firm, were really nice enough to support us and do the production drawings because we were still few people. And that building launched us. It led to the headquarters for Procter & Gamble, which would beat out IMP and Skidmore and Zamero. It led to Goldman Sachs in London. I could go on and on, job after job. That decision to not go to Iran, to stay in New York, to read the Sunday Times the next day and get that job was key to starting the firm. Now these stories, I can go hundreds of stories. These are the kind of thing that make the richness of a place the way you approach it. Now, creative marketing, since today you're going to get some points, I think, for AIA, I have to talk about marketing, design, management, leadership, all those. So marketing is very key. You know, no architect likes to admit that they call a client and ask for a job. But that's a joke because Philip Johnson was one of the greatest, going all over asking for work. They all do. Foster, Rogers, you name them. But no one wants to say it's salesmanship. No one wants to say they're selling. The reality is we are selling, but we're selling what we believe is great for mankind, for the city, so it's okay. I just admitted that, you know, we want the job, and we're going to be the best firm. I'll tell you one quick story. I don't show the picture here, but we were General Reinsurance. A friend of mine from O&Y said, General Reinsurance, a big insurance company, reinsurance company in Connecticut, is going to build a new headquarters. And so he said, call so-and-so. And I called this guy and I said, I understand you're building a new headquarters and we'd like you to consider our firm. Now, we're not even a year old, nobody's heard of us. And he says, well, I'm sorry, but we've already about to pick an architect. I said, well, did you tell him yet? He said, no. I said, well, please, dude, give me a chance. He says, why? He said, he's about to hang. I said, we're going to be the greatest firm in the world, and if you don't interview us, you will regret it. Now, I would have hung up if I was him. I thought, why in the world is he listening? He said, do you mean that? I said, yes. So we had a meeting the next week in his office. He said, if I like you, I'll introduce you to the chairman and the president. And we did, and we got the job. Now, we beat out all the other firms that had been there fully interviewed because he liked us. But it was the kind of thing I don't normally do. I don't normally say we're going to be the greatest or, you know, you're going to regret it. But I did that day because I just felt I had to keep it from hanging up. And sure enough, it worked. So these are kinds of stories that are fun. I mean, Procter & Gamble, when we won that, now Procter & Gamble is a corporation that when it does any product, it spends forever analyzing, testing. They'll go 2-3 years testing. Because when they picked an architect, there was 8 interviews. They kept narrowing them down. And we kept surviving each interview. And I started getting nervous. It's like, when is your turn going to be up that you're finished, you know? And then I got down to the last 3. It was IMP, SOM, and Marcel's. Now, we're brand new. The others are great firms, well established. Skidmore had done the first building. Pay had done some addition. They liked IM. However, we won. And the last day, we won. We got the recommendation of the interviewing committee. The last day, they sent us to meet with the president and the chairman. The president was John Smale, and he later became a CEO of General Motors. And I forgot the chairman, a very nice guy. And we went to see them. And Bill and I in our blue suits and, you know, white shirts and nervous as hell because this job's staggering. It's an 800,000 square foot addition to Procter & Gamble, one of the great companies. And we got there, you know, it was the first time I was nervous. I'm not usually nervous, but I was a little nervous that day. And for 2 hours, we talked with them. And then they said, thank you, and we'll let you know. So we walked out. We were heading back to get down and get the cab to get to the airport when the chairman ran over and said, hey, guys, I want your trip to be great going home. You got the job. And we flew home without a plane. It was just amazing. So those are kind of the stories of getting started. But we were lucky because people liked us, and we did good work, and we had great service. Now, our philosophy is quite simple. We're not going to try to do buildings that, and I talked about this in the class, that are just all about sculpture, just about iconic form. And buildings need to relate to their place, to their function, to budgets, to reality, and be the best it can be within those forces. If you try to take a building and bend it and twist it and turn it to make it something it shouldn't be, the building, I think, suffers despite the fact that the critics are going to say, oh, that great new iconic street. But you know what? It's not architecture. It's becoming sculpture. Architecture is about people who live and inhabit it, who work in these buildings, who study. And architecture is about the place, the impact on its place. And so creating great environments for people to live in and work in and they feel good in is a great role. As architects, we have one of the great responsibilities, and I hate to see it always boil down to some architectural or some form. The role we play in life is one of the most important of any profession, including the medical, law, I don't care which one. We create environments that affect the health and welfare of people, affect their mental ability, you can come into space and you know how you react, how your eyes react to the light or the texture or the ceiling height. You know how you feel when you're in a space that makes you stand up straight and smile versus feel harassed or unhappy. And so we have a great responsibility, and it's more about that than just trying to create iconic form that we become famous. And, you know, look, Frank Gehry's a brilliant architect who's done it with buildings that the iconic form makes some sense. But tall towers that are leaning and twisting, in my opinion, are not great, not the way to do buildings. Okay, I've talked enough about introduction, and now I got to find my pointer. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of this quickly to bring you to different periods in time. Okay, just a little bit about KPF. We did our skyline study here, which shows to the right is Europe, center is Asia, and the left is the U.S. You can see just the scale of projects, and you'll see that later on. Because the last piece I'm going to talk about is China, and what China means to all of us in the years ahead. Our offices, as Al mentioned, are up there. I don't have to reread them for you. That indicates, they're not soils on the paper, that is where we've done projects. And the darker the color means the more projects. So it could be 10 projects, 20 projects in a given place. And so whether it's New York or Asia, China in particular, you're seeing a lot of density. But just as important as where we work is who is our staff? Who are we? We have employees from 45 countries and 250 cities. We speak, I think it's 34 or more languages. Hopefully some of it's English so I understand it. But we have a brilliant staff. I mean, we have people who are the most talented that I have ever seen, dedicated from all over the world. And it's like the United Nations should be. Everybody works together as a team, and it's really wonderful. And the results are pretty outstanding. We also recognize young people, and as they do well, they're quickly promoted. That just gives you some statistics which aren't all that important. And the fact that we were ranked #1 by Crane's Business Week in New York, again, not that important. Started July 4th, 1976. This was our group. Now, would you hire that group? What client would give confidence to hire Bill Pedersen on the right, Shelley Fox, I had gray hair even then, and Pat Conway, who was one of our planners and a wonderful writer. And I mentioned ABC. This was the Army. And we converted it into a 1-hour soap opera studio. It was a big success, and then did a master plan of many buildings, which we then carried out over the years developing, including the first one of our buildings back in '6. This was, I think, in '77, was for ABC's local channel, and we created this great atrium of workspace where people could see each other, they broadcast from, and it was a whole change of the studios and the way ABC worked. And the lineup for today, the Good Morning America, whatever their show is right there. This was 333 Wacker Drive, bend of the Chicago River. This building was very economical. For those of you in Detroit, it was the first building to use Ford motor glass on a building without the windshield wipers. It looks as taut as it can be. The plan is a little bit unusual in that a curved facade back then was viewed as not very functional. As it turned out, it was laid out in a very beautiful way. But the key thing is about this, from a development point of view, this building, when it was built, was by itself. And today it is surrounded by all the buildings it inspired and was a catalyst for. This whole waterfront has become key and important to Chicago.